Our guest today is the treasurer for the city of Chicago. Prior to her public service, she served as vice president at Northern Trust Global Investments. Our guest today serves on 5 public pension fund boards. She grew up on Chicago's South Side. Our guest today graduated from Smith College and earned her master's degree from the University of Chicago. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the City Club of Chicago, the treasurer, Stephanie Neely. Stephanie? Have some fun up here.
I'm going to have fun. Well, let's see. We took care of everybody else, so let's see who else we can get to stand up. I have to start by thanking my great staff. So if the people from old and new from the treasurer's office could stand up, because without them, we wouldn't have great success. So if my staff could please stand up and be recognized. Thank you very much. I also want to say thank you to the Chicago Police Department, as well as the other first responders, for keeping our city and our citizens safe. Jay, I'm not that tall. Okay. They did a fantastic job, so let's give them a round of applause as well. I appreciate everyone coming out here today. I think I have lots of family and friends, so if I ask everybody else to stand up, I think we'll have everybody covered. So thanks for coming out. This is actually my 3rd time speaking at the City Club since becoming treasurer of the City of Chicago. So I'm pretty confident you guys all know my background. But I will say that my 20-plus years in the private sector, 5 years in the public sector, what I learned from my parents, and my experience as a single mother to the most important man in my life, Justin, have given me a unique opportunity and insight that understands the challenges that face our city. And I truly value the opportunity that my position as treasurer has afforded me to help make Chicago a better place. As you know, as city treasurer, I manage all of the city's money, and in that role, I focus on 3 main goals. Job number 1 is to keep the money safe. Job number 2, to maintain enough liquidity so when Alderman Moore and his colleagues decide to spend the money, it's there. And 3, to maximize our returns within our general investment policy. Since I last spoke to you, I embarked on some significant and exciting changes to our investment policy that I'd like to briefly mention. In keeping with our primary goals, and after consulting my personal crystal ball, I found that current conditions and trends in the marketplace suggested that we needed to expand and diversify our portfolio of investments to increase potential returns. So last fall, I went before City Council to advocate for 4 main additions to the investment policy that included the following prime grade securities. 1, commercial paper of non-financial companies. In the past, we limited ourselves to Bank CP because they were considered solid as a rock. Obviously, recent experience has shaken that belief. Secondly, we added corporate debt of U.S. companies. They offer better yields than U.S. treasuries and can be an important part of diversification strategy. Next, we added supranational debt. I did that, didn't I, Tom? I said natural because before City Council I said that and they didn't get it. But no ghost, just supranational debt. This is the debt securities of international organizations such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. As lenders of last resort, they offer AAA-rated securities at higher yields than U.S. treasuries, and they give us international diversification that we've not had previously. And finally, we added municipal bonds. We thought these securities would give us higher returns and diversify our portfolio. These changes were approved by City Council, and we began implementing the new strategy last October. Since then, municipal bonds have been the biggest of our 4 new investment avenues, becoming nearly 9% of our portfolio. By focusing on increasing the diversification of our portfolio with these securities, I believe we have significantly increased the growth potential of our overall portfolio without jeopardizing our primary goal of keeping our money safe. Beyond my fiduciary responsibilities, I am working hard on 2 other priorities: improving the financial literacy of our city residents, both young and old, and providing much-needed support to kickstart our city's small businesses. In order to not be a winded-mouthed politician, I'd like to share with you only a few of our accomplishments my office has made over the last 5 years. We created a unique partnership to offer financial education to more than 240,000 3rd and 5th grade students in Chicago public schools. and have provided financial planning courses to thousands of city employees and college students. Last year, we created Bank On Chicago, an innovative initiative to bring Chicago's unbanked population into the financial mainstream by connecting them with starter checking accounts and financial literacy resources. In the first 6 months of the program, almost 4,000 new accounts were opened. On the small business front, we spearheaded the creation of a $3 million small business micro-lending program that offers affordable rates. Through this program, we've helped more than 135 small businesses get off the ground, hire more than 80 employees, and expand their potential. And we also offer a variety of free small business and entrepreneurial education resources, things like one-on-one mentoring, business plan development workshops, and an annual small business expo that we co-sponsor with Crane's Business. And if that's not enough, I also serve on all the city's pension boards. Particularly, I serve as president of the Laborers Pension Fund. Jim Capasso is also here. I'm the vice president of the Firemen's Pension Fund, and I have voting power on all the boards except for the Teachers Fund. While I'm very passionate about financial literacy and helping small business development, the focus of my remarks today will be about our struggling municipal pension system. I want to start off by showing you a few charts and graphs. This chart shows where we stand right now with our city pension system. Most of you know this, but it's important to emphasize how big of a problem we have. This is, quite frankly, pretty ugly. Very ugly. These 4 pension funds are dangerously underfunded, with fire and police looking at default in the very near future. Just to give you an idea of how much money we're talking about, this chart shows our unfunded liabilities for each of these pension funds. A total unfunded liability of $17.7 billion. This graph is the path we've been on since 2002. The most telling part of this is the laborer's pension line at the top. Its funding ratio was over 100% in the year 2002 and is now at 60%. While the market crash of 2008 can explain some of the decline, the funding ratio decline started much earlier, which means there is a much larger underlying problem. Low funding ratios create 2 opposing problems. On the one hand, your limited assets need higher returns in order to meet growing future obligations. On the other hand, you need to protect principal in order to pay current retirees, which ultimately puts the fund even further behind. This is a no-win situation. So let's return to the laborer's pension fund and look at the 30-year projections. This chart shows the laborers' fund projections using different assumptions of investment returns. The base case assumption for annual investment returns used by the actuaries is 8%. We can certainly argue that's an optimistic assumption, but as the projections show, the previously well-funded laborers' pension fund will likely run out of money in 15 years if dramatic changes are not enacted soon. That's 15 years for the laborers' fund that is currently the best funded of the 4 main city pensions, and that's only if we can earn 8%. So you can imagine how much time the other 3 have. Not much. So now we have to ask ourselves, how did we get here? I think of the pension issue as a 3-legged stool: contributions, investment returns, and benefits. All 3 make up the pension issue, and all 3 are interrelated. As a trustee, my job is to protect the pension fund's assets and to grow them. Let's start with investment returns. The economic downturns of 2000 and 2008 greatly affected pension investments. In 2008, each of the 4 municipal pension portfolios lost between 28 and 36%. While in 2008 losses were large, pension portfolios' overall 10-year performance is positive and has consistently outpaced the S&P 500. That being said, the large losses in asset values make it very difficult to recover through investment strategy alone. If you start with $1 million and if you lose half of it in 1 year, it would take 10 years to get back to the $1 million you started with. And that's assuming you can consistently get 8% return every year. We are not going to invest our way out of this problem. We also can't continue to use the 8% investment return as our assumption. I know my good friend Mike Moran is here, and he may disagree with me, but that's okay. Right now, we are liquidating principal 10 out of the 12 months of every year to cover current liabilities. So how can we truly expect to consistently grow the portfolio at that rate? This is also an unrealistic assumption because markets are just too volatile. They're all over the place. It should be closer to 7 or 7.5%, in my opinion, to better account for the fact that we no longer are long-term investors. This will also change the way we discount our liabilities and make them appear larger, but it's a change that we can no longer put off. So our $17 billion liability is actually much higher, probably close to $20 billion. This is where the contribution and benefits leg of the pension stool enter. Simply put, we have promised too much and put aside too little. Every year, actuaries determine the annual required contributions, or ARC, in order to ensure that the fund is properly funded. They account for things like the number of current retirees, life expectancy, when active members will ultimately retire, and their projected benefits. The actual contributions paid by employees in the city, however, are determined by the state. Employees contribute a percentage of each paycheck, usually between 8 and 9 1/8%. And the city provides a match that varies by fund as a multiple of the employee's contribution. I think this chart shows that. 2% for police, all the way down to laborers at 1%. There are certainly years in the past that the total contribution may have been adequate, but over the last 10 to 15 years, it has fallen further behind and become increasingly inadequate. So while employees in the city of Chicago have met their statutory obligation to each fund, the state has not yet had the political will to reduce the gap between what is required by law and what is required by the fund. The state not requiring by law to fully fund pensions is a part of the reason we are in this mess. It's a bad incentive. So now let's talk about benefits. The retirement benefit that was originally promised plays a significant role in our shortfall. The benefits are based on years of service, average end-of-year career salary, and cost of living adjustments. The total benefit is also based on how long we expect people to live. Recent tables used by actuaries to estimate life expectancies were updated to reflect that people are living longer. People living longer means that we have to pay out more benefits, resulting in a bigger liability for the pension system. It's all your fault. You stopped smoking, you started eating better, you're running outside, it's all your fault. The 8 to 9 1/8% of income that employees contribute is 50% more than what employees in Los Angeles pay, and almost triple the employee contribution in New York. And yet the funding gap continues to increase. I bring this up to say that employees are doing their fair share. Clearly, we need to figure out a solution in which contributions and benefits are more in balance. I'll make one last comment about benefits, since we've seen some stories in the news recently about pension abuses resulting in large payouts. It is true that there are loopholes in our system that a few people in position of power have used to enrich themselves, but those abuses are a drop in the bucket. And while we should do everything in our power to close these loopholes, we cannot lose sight of the more fundamental problems that need solving immediately. Trust me, closing loopholes is a must, but it will not close the $17 billion deficit that our pension funds are seeing. Whether or not you believe that the defined benefit retirement plans are a good policy, the reality is that these are enforceable contractual relationships, and we must figure out a workable strategy to solve this problem. We cannot keep kicking the can down the road. So what are our options to reduce these liabilities? In 2010, the State Assembly created a second benefit tier for 4 pension systems that attempts to reduce the imbalance between contributions and benefits that currently exists. This, however, only applies to new employees starting after January 1st, 2011. So while this is certainly a step in the right direction, its impact on the unfunded liability problem doesn't happen until new hires begin to retire, which is 20 to 30 years down the road. And as I pointed out earlier, we don't have 30 years. Earlier this month, Mayor Emanuel went to Springfield and made a series of proposals intended to strengthen our pension system. 1, create a 10-year pause on cost of living adjustments, COLA, or which I like to call a scheduled pay increase, a 1% a year increase in employee contributions over 5 years, increase the retirement age to 67, and alternative retirement options for new employees. These are all well-known policy options for reducing pension liabilities and could go a long way to reducing the current danger of insolvency. There has been some criticism about this plan, so it's important that we consider the benefits, the costs, and the basic fairness to all those that participate. Let me give you a couple of examples. Right now, current retirees are guaranteed 3% annual increase in pension payments regardless of actual changes in the cost of living. Putting a 10-year pause on these increases for the average retiree in the municipal system, for example, would save around $880 million over a 10-year period. In exchange, not only would current employees increase their contributions by about $633 million over the same period, but they'd also be expected to work additional years before retiring. For retirees, the pause on COLA adjustments will be painfully, particularly because most of them use their pensions as their primary source of retirement income. But if we're going to ask current employees to contribute more, work longer, and get a lower retirement benefit, it seems only fair to ask current retirees to share in the burden of savings. After all, 100% of zero is still zero. And let me repeat what I said before. All of our pension systems have less than 15 years of solvency remaining, so everyone is going to have to give a little. To add to the urgency, we currently have more people taking benefits than are actually paying into the system. Let me also touch on increasing the retirement age to 67. When the Social Security Act was passed in 1935, the average life expectancy was 62, and the retirement age to access these funds, 65. So while it makes sense to increase the retirement age because we are living longer, we need to consider the impact on workers whose jobs require a lot of physical labor. For example, do we really want a laborer or a fireman or a policeman to still be working the streets and beat when they're in their upper 60s? These folks may not be able to work into their 60s, and if they do, they are likely to have a higher chance of injury, which result in costly payouts for disability, which affects pension systems as well. So it's very important that we carefully consider how we implement a retirement age increase. The mayor's plan, if enacted, will certainly help us stave off our immediate danger of insolvency, but we also need to think about how to put our pension system on firm ground for the long term. I definitely don't want to have to come back here in 15 years and say, well, we're in trouble yet again. As we all know, most of the country, both public and private, have been dealing with the dilemma of unfunded pension liabilities. And this has spurred some new and creative solutions, including a voluntary lump sum payout strategy recently proposed by Ford, shared risk cash balance plans, and actuarially fair early retirement packages. All of these solutions have pros and cons and should be examined closely. More close to home, I want to briefly discuss one approach that is being studied by Mike Moran of the Fires Pension Fund. In 2011, Public Act 96-1495 was signed into law and seeks to achieve 90% funding ratio by 2040. As we saw earlier, the Fireman's Pension Fund is the most precarious position of the four municipal funds I've mentioned and may have only 10 years of solvency remaining, so it's clear that drastic action is necessary. The first and most interesting part of this approach is to separate the active and retiree investment portfolios to better align the risk profile of each group. I will discuss this part later in more detail. The second part is to increase the contribution rate for active employees from 9 1/8 to 10% to achieve a better balance between contributions and benefits. The final component is the most necessary element of the overall strategy, as numbers show that there would be a financial benefit to both Fire Pension Fund and the city if we were able to infuse $2 billion in a drastically shorter period of time than 30 years. The need for a large cash infusion is twofold. The periodic infusion puts the fund on a path to overall long-term stability in its ability to pay benefits, and it allows the fund to refocus its primary investment strategy away from protection of principal towards long-term growth. While the need for cash infusion is obvious, the method for raising the money is not. There are multiple ways of raising funds, including using the city's municipal bonding capacity to issue pension obligation bonds. This strategy, however, carries significant downside risk to the city because the issuer is counting on the fact that they will be able to generate investment returns in excess of its borrowing cost. Timing is an important factor in this strategy, and given the current market environment, it's not the right time. One other consideration worth mentioning is a recent indication by rating agencies that they are not enthused with increasing our general obligation bonding capacity without some dedicated revenue source. So before we go down that avenue, we need to consider all possible funding strategies and select the one that minimizes overall risk to the city's finances. As a trustee of pension funds, my number one concern and responsibility is to guide the overall investment strategy. So let me return to the first part of the fireman's proposal, the separation of the active and retiree investment portfolios. The reason to separate the two portfolios is the ability to allocate risk appropriately. In order to ensure its ability to pay out current benefits, it seems reasonable that the pension fund's current retiree investment strategy would be concerned with security and stability of the portfolio's principal. That means lowering the risk profile significantly, and that means a focus on bonds, money markets, and even CDs. Active members, on the other hand, have a benefit of time. Active members in the Fireman Pension Fund, for example, are on average 15 years away from retirement. This time allows for an investment strategy focused on growth by taking on an appropriate amount of risk. Why is this reasonable? Because while there may be some months or even a couple of years where there are losses because of market volatility, more often than not, a properly managed portfolio will experience real growth over a course of 15 to 20 years due to diversification. The idea is similar to the strategy used by target date, mutual funds that allocate their asset mix based on time to retirement. Assuming that sufficient funds are available, another advantage of the separation or bifurcation of the investment portfolio is the ability to participate in investments that have significant long-term growth potential, such as private equity and real estate. These are just a few of the potential investments that are possible, but the important point to take away from this bifurcation strategy is that it is a focus on better alignment investment risk with active and retired members. Let me sum all of this up. The financial problems of our pension systems are large. Insolvency is not something off in the distant horizon, but rather a consequence looming closer and closer as every day passes. All parties in the pension conundrum need to come together and be willing to sacrifice something in order to ensure collective survival. They must keep in mind that the decisions they make not only affects members of the pension system, but all city residents. I will, of course, continue to do my part as a trustee to the pension funds by advocating for sensible policy changes and providing investment guidance. Ideas such as the portfolio bifurcation are just an example of creative thinking that will be needed to get our house in order. If you have any questions or any ideas, more importantly, please come see me. I'm sure you may have some questions, so I'll take them at this time. Thank you.
Moderator always starts the first question, the Alex Spivak rule. Alan Spivak, no one knows who he was except maybe Marty McLaughlin. Shows you. Very good. Now you can see. Lawrence Spivak. I was trusting you. It's just as if you were on your game.
You're awake.
How does this interact with the problems the county and the state are having with the same issue of pensions?
I mean, the only interaction is it all comes down to what state legislatures and the governor are going to do.
Short answer, short question. Martha Jantro, where are you? Oh, right here. Okay. So you can see she's a former school board member. Should disaster happen and the city performs city's pensions, she also she's a school teacher, the city's pensions do become insolvent, what would the strategy be then?
We're not going to let that happen. We can't let that happen. There are too many people, thank you, we can't let that happen. People have worked hard, they put money in, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that doesn't happen. I stumbled.
I think, Treasurer Neely, you have intimidated this crowd. That's it, City Club B? Well, not exactly a sparkling performance by the audience. That's a D+ in my grade book, right, Martha? A, always. You're the treasurer. No treasurer gets below an A. All right, how about a big round of applause for Stephanie?